The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Zhang. A new strategy to study how Singapore can continue to thrive amid geopolitical changes like the U.S. tariffs and technological disruptions has been formed. Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim-yong unveiled the Economic Strategy Review, aimed at charting a forward-looking blueprint to secure quality opportunities for Singapore's businesses and workers. So what do these strategies mean for Singapore's economic future, and how will these strategies translate into real impact for local businesses, workers, and industries? Well, joining us today to delve into this deeper is Sumit Agarwal, who is the Professor of Finance, Real Estate, and Economics at NUS Business School. Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, how are you? I'm glad to be with you on this program.
All right, Professor, I just want to start off by asking you, what is the Economic Strategy Review and how does it differ from past exercises like the 2010 ESC or 2017 CFE in terms of ambition and scope?
Okay, so the Economic Strategy Review, or ESR, I think is really about preparing Singapore for a very different global future. Unlike the past exercises, which focused on growth and productivity, I think this one reflects a world that is more fragmented and has more uncertainty. That's why it is broader in scope and more urgent in tone, I think. Because we are not just talking about upgrading industries, we are talking about staying relevant in this more complex and divided world, or more uncertain world to be more precise.
Okay, so what does the timing of this ESR, especially given that it's amid global economic fragmentation, signal about the government's view of Singapore's future vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So the fact this is happening now, especially around this trade war, tech rivalry, supply chain disruptions, shows that the government is reading the sign. They see that Singapore's economic model, which actually is about openness and global connectivity, is under pressure. So the government is signaling by saying that ESR is a way for us to think about the future.
Is the ESR then more of a defense strategy to preserve its economic edge, or is it more of an offensive one to charter new areas of growth?
That's a good question. I think of it really as both.
Okay.
There is this defensive layer in it. How do we protect the jobs, anchor investment, and keep Singapore attractive? I think that's the defensive part. But there is also a very offensive push. How do we lead in areas like AI, green tech, advanced manufacturing? So I think the government is thinking on both fronts on how to keep Singapore relevant.
Well, the ESR comprises 5 committees focused on strengthening Singapore's economy, harnessing technology, supporting startups, empowering workers, and managing restructuring impacts. Professor, why do you think it was necessary to divide the review into these 5 specific committees?
Yeah, I mean, these issues are very complex, but they are also interconnected. Okay, so you cannot really have this one size fits all approach. So you need these focus themes looking at competitiveness, tech, startup, people, and restructuring. And each of these committees will have to deep dive, but also coordinate across each other. Hence, you need these committees, but also have nimbleness to be able to talk to each other.
Well, does it sufficiently reflect the complexity of today's economic transformation, or do you see any blind spots here?
Okay, that's an important question. Clearly, the structure makes sense, but obviously, there always will be risk for gaps, like whether we are doing enough on climate resilience, or are we thinking about regional integration with ASEAN? So, to me, the real test is not just forming committees, but also how they talk to each other and integrate their findings into one coherent game plan or a roadmap.
Right. And speaking of which, it looks like each committee is co-chaired by 2 political office holders who will be joined by private sector, union, and other stakeholders. Is this balance between government leadership and private sector involvement in these committees optimal for bold policy innovation?
I think so. It's crucial in my mind. Government brings these policy tools, but the private sector brings the urgency, the pragmatism, and maybe also the ground reality. The private sector knows what's really going on. So the dialogue, if it is honest, and there is space for fresh thinking and consensus around these things, I think will be the right model. But we do need it not to just tick off some boxes that we did this, we had this code creation, but we need some results.
Okay. Well, tapping briefly on each of the committees here. First, we have the Committee on Global Competitiveness, which will strengthen Singapore's economic standing and relevance to the world with a three-pronged approach. Professor, with protectionism rising globally, how can Singapore maintain its position as a trusted hub for goods, capital, and talent? I mean, what do you foresee the committee to focus on?
Yeah, so I think what Singapore needs to do is almost double down what makes Singapore important and relevant. Stability, transparency, talent, trust. I mean, this is what Singapore is known for. So that means reinforcing supply chains, reliability, staying open to global talent, and actually signaling smart trade agreements. I think this committee can look at how we remain useful in the world, especially around the currency.
And we also have a committee on technology and innovation. Are there any structural obstacles Singapore faces in becoming a global innovation node beyond just funding infrastructure, Professor? I mean, if so, how should the committee mitigate these challenges?
Yeah, I think innovation needs some tolerance for the future because I think what I worry about is how do we think what will happen in global innovation? Okay, we need to be nimble. We need to worry about what can happen. Are there some failures that we can encounter and how will they respond to that? So I think the committee needs to think about how to create room for more bottom up and innovative approach in this space.
And next, we also have the Committee on Entrepreneurship, which will strengthen the country's ecosystem for startups and entrepreneurship. How, though, can the government support startups without, crowding out private risk capital or distorting market incentives?
That's a great question. See, the government should play the role of an enabler, not like a competitor. So that means de-risking early stage ideas, improving access like to global markets, and building platforms and not be in the business of, say, picking winners. So if the ecosystem is healthy, private capital will clearly follow. And Singapore is showing that evidence by creating partnerships, say, with Malaysia or Vietnam. And all this is kind of part of the same game.
Okay. And we also have a committee on human capital to empower workers with the relevant skills to support career mobility and resilience. Are Singapore's, existing upskilling and, skills future schemes adequate to meet the pace of technological change, or is a more radical rethink needed here?
Yeah, so Skills Future, I think, is a good foundation, okay? But I think we need to accelerate the change in this dimension. We may need more nimble, modular training system, better job placement tools, and more employer-driven programs. So essentially, ask the surveys, ask employers, what are you looking for? What should the universities be training them for, okay? And we need to kind of shift the mindset from learning to get a job to learning throughout your career. And I think that mindset is very important. And I think we are moving in that direction, but more can be done.
Definitely. Well, finally, we have the Committee on Managing Impact of Restructuring. Professor, how can this committee strike a balance, though, between short-term job displacement support and long-term structural transformation of industries without, creating dependence on government intervention?
That's a tough balance. You want to help people through the transition, but you don't want to create long-term dependency on the government. So I think the focus should be on resilience, giving workers the tools, the support, and maybe the confidence to adopt and grow and not just kind of survive. So I don't think it's just about cushioning the fall, but also teaching them how to bounce back stronger.
Right. Well, overall, Professor, how will these new strategies build upon or differ from what Singapore has already been doing? What do you think are the risks involved if the ESR fails to meet its goals?
Yeah, so that's another good question. I mean, to me, this builds on past strategy. But to me, the stakes are definitely much higher. It's no longer just about moving up the value chain. It's about whether we remain relevant. If the ESR doesn't land well, I think we'll risk falling behind, losing investor confidence, and I think seeing more structural unemployment. So this is essentially, as I would think about it, like a make or break moment on how this kind of goes through this entire effort.
Well, as we try to stay relevant here, do you think these strategies will be enough to future proof Singapore's economy, or should more be done?
I mean, this is a very good first step, but the future is always essentially like a moving target. We need to keep listening, learning, and adjusting because Singapore does something, other countries will react, and we already know how America is behaving.
Right.
So the ESR should be seen as a living plan, not just something we file away. If we can stay flexible and bold, I think I'll be optimistic on the way ahead and Singapore to stay ahead of the curve, essentially.
Definitely. Well, some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining me today.
No problem.
Thank you. That was Sumit Agarwal, Professor of Finance, Real Estate, and Economics at NUS Business School. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jung.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.